No.
Kill children.
I've asked you a question
No,
about Muhammad's example in the fact that he had 6 slaves, and you're saying Muhammad is an example to you today. So was Muhammad a good example or a bad example when he had 6 slaves and when he allowed his Sahaba to have 6
You're
slaves?
a good example. When
God, a good example. What are you talking about?
Does anyone notice that he's not answering the
Why
question?
do you answer my
Moses is
question?
good
Why do you answer
example.
my question?
They're all good
Why do you answer
examples.
mine?
So
That's what I said. You don't.
I'll ask the question.
Your own scripture says.
I'll ask the question
They're
Your
all
own
again.
scripture
good.
says a lot worse.
I'll ask the question again. I'll ask the question again.
Look, mate, I don't want to get involved.
Was Muhammad a good or a bad example to you when he had 6? So, Muhammad was a good example. Always
Excuse
a good
me.
example. Do you want to have 6 slaves?
Slavery came with Moses, with the
Do
Jews.
you want to have 6 slaves?
Yeah, but your God permits slavery.
15:3. What does it say?
Yeah.
First Samuel.
Now to live together.
So we're talking about Muhammad, but they don't want to talk about
Yeah,
Muhammad.
you don't want to talk
They
about
want to
the
talk
Bible.
about First
You don't
Samuel.
want to talk about the Bible.
I'll
Talking
address that
diplomatic.
point.
Why you
I'll address that point. I'll address that point. I will address that point. Let me 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 address that point.
Why not?
If he can be quiet for a second, I'll try and address your point.
Let us see what that says.
If he can be quiet for a second, I'll try and address that point. Right. So my point to you is that the Jews today don't read the Torah. They believe in the Torah, but they don't read the Torah and think they have to have sex slaves. Slavery in the Islamic world was only made illegal the last century. Now I'll ask you again, because you haven't answered my question. Muhammad had 6 slaves,
Answer about the Bible, mate.
and the Sahaba, the followers of Muhammad, had 6 slaves. Do you think that's a good example or a bad example?
Do you think there's
What
a
about
good
that
example?
commandment was given? Was it morally
You're not answering
acceptable
my question.
or not? No, I need to know that command was given to Moses
Answer my
by
question.
your God. Was it morally
Answer my
acceptable?
question.
Was it morally
The
acceptable?
Jews do not argue for the reinstitution of slavery. They don't argue that. Excuse me.
Ask him question.
So I will ask you again, was Muhammad a good or a bad example to have sex slaves?
The Jews,
Answer the question. Good or bad?
it's his heart and his mind.
He's not
They're
answering the
cousins.
question.
They're family.
Is there any Muslim here that wants to answer the question?
I'm a Muslim.
You're a Muslim. I'll ask you then.
No, but I don't believe the way that they believe.
That's fine.
I don't believe the Hadith and Sunnah because the Hadith and the Sunnah actually demonize the Prophet.
Okay.
But if you want to understand the Prophet, you study the book itself that he delivered.
The Quran.
Yeah, then you understand what he really was, as opposed to how they're led to believe it.
Okay, so let me ask you this question, because obviously we got 2 kinds of Muslims here, which addresses this guy's
Sorry,
question.
we are
We've got-
Muslim one.
we've got
We are not kind of Muslims.
who believe
We
in
are
the Hadith
Muslim one.
and some
He
Muslims
said
who
we are
don't believe in the
kind of
Hadith.
Muslim. No chance
Let me
for
ask you this question.
No, we are together. We are all Muslim.
In a Quran-only version of Islam, without the Hadith, is slavery permissible or impermissible? Impermissible. So there is no verse in the Quran that talks about slavery.
Yes, there is. But the question you've asked me, does Salam permit
Yeah.
slavery? It does not permit.
It does not permit it. So Muhammad didn't instruct his followers to have slaves.
Bring me the verse.
Okay, so the brother here said there's no verse in the Quran.
No, I didn't say
No, I
that.
don't believe
There's
it.
no verse in the
that.
Quran that permits
That allows it.
slavery, that allows slavery. Okay, so listen,
What chapter is it? So I can check it on my notes.
Surah 4:24. Could you find the one about the prostitution as well? Yeah, Surah 4:24. Also prohibited are women already married, except those whom your right hands possess. This is talking about slavery. This is talking about the possession of one human owning another
How
human.
you know why you're not in the throne?
Where's the one about-
How you know that? Which hadith?
Ibn Kathir.
Well, Ibn Kathir, no.
Here's another verse.
You can't put anything Ibn
Here's
Kathir.
another verse.
You can't put anything Ibn Kathir.
Al-Qurtubi.
Here's another verse.
Which proof?
24:33. So another
How do you
verse.
know this? The truth.
This is your Quran.
No, the Quran is
Translated by
different.
your own Muslim scholars. This isn't a Christian.
Give me the Quran.
This is a
He can
this is a
explain the Quran the way he
Are you
wants.
listening?
He can write what he wants. What are you talking about here?
A lot of the translations that you have today,
Yeah.
to translate the Quran, they use the Hadith and Sunnah.
Speak up, brother. This brother can't hear you. Speak up.
All good.
What they do is
Louder, louder.
there are certain verses within the Quran
Yeah.
that they translate
That doesn't matter.
translate
It's
the
your
Quran
brother.
using the Hadith and
It's
Sunnah
your brother
to
Muslim.
translate the Quran. And what they've done is to justify certain sayings within the Hadith, they've manipulated certain words, because we know as Muslims that words in Arabic have multiple meaning words. One word can mean 100 different things.
Okay.
But what the translators have done, have decided to choose a particular word to corroborate with the hadith, but they could have chosen an alternative meaning for that same word.
How do you know they're wrong?
Okay, brother, sorry, if I may. This is a response. The defense given by this Muslim brother, because these two Muslim brothers didn't want to answer the question, was that the translators have manipulated the translation certain verses to agree with the hadith. Now I have a couple of responses to that. Firstly, is there any Muslim here who believes that you can be a Muslim without believing in the hadith? Put your hand up. Do you believe in the hadith? Do you believe in the hadith? According to you, is this man who doesn't believe in the hadith a Muslim? He is. Okay. Do you reject all hadith?
Period.
All hadith, period.
Period.
Just the Quran. Okay. So, is there a translation of the Quran that you believe in?
Yeah.
Which?
It's by Edip Yüksel. Edip Yüksel.
Edip Yüksel.
Yeah.
I don't know who he is.
It's a great translator.
That's fair enough. I will have to look it up.
Yeah.
I will have to look it up.
So I look at this other website,
Yeah.
QuranIslam.org. No, QuranIslam.org.
Okay.
Fantastic information
Now,
about Islam.
since if you could bring forward that translation, we'll work from the two together. We'll work from the two together. According to the Quran, in Surah 24, Ayah 33, it states, and I quote, translated by Yusuf Ali, a scholar of Islam, "But force not your maids to prostitution when they desire chastity, in order that ye may make a gain in the goods of this life. But if anyone compels them, yet after such compulsion, Allah is oft forgiving, most merciful." So the Quran is discouraging Muslims from forcing women into prostitution, but it's saying if you do it, Allah will turn to you in mercy, because He's oft forgiving, most merciful. So I ask all the Muslims here, does that ring good with your conscience? Do you think it is good to force women into prostitution? No. Yes or no?
Muhammad, he don't
I've
exist
read
trouble.
your Quran. These are not my words. These are the words of Yusuf Ali.
Leave the Muslim alone.
Why are you deceiving?
Why don't leave the Muslim alone?
Deceiving.
Muhammad,
His brother
he
said
don't
I'm
exist trouble.
deceiving. So film the verse. Film the verse. It's going to be on YouTube. The verse.
Surah 24, verse 83.
Film the verse. See the verse. Would you like to read the verse? This man is saying that I'm lying. This man is saying that I'm lying. He accuses me of lying. I've got the verse here. I'll read it again.
That you can
If
write
I'm
it by
lying,
yourself.
I'll show you the verse.
Welcome to Sandbox.
But force not your maids to prostitution when they desire chastity, in order that ye may make a gain in the goods of this life. But if anyone compels them, yet after such compulsion, is Allah oft forgiving, most merciful. That's Yusuf Ali's translation of the Quran. I'm not making it up. The evidence is there. He wants me to show him. Anyone who wants to look, I'm holding the book. You can look at it. He wants to read.
Your translation is different from my translation.
Okay, brothers. This guy has a different translation of the Quran, a different version. Read your version.
It says, "Let those who are not able to marry continue to be chaste until Allah reaches them." Allah is for us, akhi.
No, Salah, we don't have different, we have one.
Can we
We don't have different.
Let
listen to this
those
brother?
who are not able to marry continue to be chaste until Allah enriches them of his bounty, if those whom you have contractual rights will seek the signature, then sign with them if you find that they are ready, and give them from the wealth of Allah which he has bestowed upon them. Do not force your daughters into marriage when they have desired independence, in order that you may make a gain in the goods of this worldly life. But if anyone has compelled them, then considering their compulsion, Allah is forgiving.
Okay, so what we have here is two really radical, different translations of the one Quran. Mine says prostitution, his says marriage. So, let me ask you this question. How many copies of the Quran are there? How many?
How do you know?
You tell Maryam Virgin is a prostitute. You're Christian, the Jews.
How do you know?
Maryam Virgin, we love Maryam Virgin, we love her. We never talk about Christianity,
Who
bad.
translated your version? Who translated your version of the Quran?
Edith Yüksel.
Edith Yüksel. Mine's Yosef Ali. We have, so this is an interesting point. We have two Arabic speakers who can't agree whether a word is saying prostitution or marriage.
No, which one?
So has anyone got hold of the Arabic? So, coming back to my point, those of you who believe Muhammad is your
No one. Which one? Which Quran? The Bible is not memorized by no one. Don't get too happy.
Which Quran is
slaves? Yes or no?
Excuse me.
Can you answer the question?
Why you don't go to Papa? No, forget Muhammad. Why don't go to Papa of Roma? I know him. Mother Teresa.
Once you address that, then we can address.
Okay. So,
Sorry? My family is Jews. My family is Christian. My family are Jewish. Alhamdulillah.
15,
I'm Muslim.
3.
What's wrong with it? That's the wrong people. Go away from us. Fucking rubbish.
Okay.
And you show me,
Okay.
and then you show me where is example than that in the Quran. And you show me where is commandment you find in the Quran than this.
So,
Show me.
the Muslims don't want to answer the question.
Okay, the Muslim.
They don't.
Why you want to answer any question?
Answer any question. Answer any question. They don't want to answer any question. They want to talk about the Old Testament.
Our belief, we know.
Let me ask you this question and then we'll talk about the Old Testament. So, if I do something that's wrong, and then someone else who does something that's wrong, does that justify what I do? Yes or no?
How do we know?
It doesn't. So, 15, 15:3. Now it says in the book of Samuel 1:15, this is the Muslims' defense. He didn't want to answer the question about whether Muhammad was a moral example. He didn't want to answer the question about whether he should take slaves or not. And he didn't want to talk about the verse that said not forcing women into prostitution. Instead, he wanted to change the subject and talk about this verse. Now go and strike Amalek and utterly destroy all that he has, and do not spare him, but put to death both man, woman and child, infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey. Now, so, do I believe that this is something that I should do? No.
I'm not asking you should do. Is it morally acceptable?
At the time, yes.
It was acceptable.
It was acceptable at the time, yes.
I rest my case.
It was acceptable at the time. But here's the difference. Here's the difference. Do you accept that it is morally acceptable to have slaves today?
I'm not asking you today.
He's not answering the question again. I'll ask the Muslim one more time. Please. Well, I don't know your name. I'll call you by your name if you want. What's your name?
I rest my case. If you call that acceptable.
So I'll ask the brother again. Do you believe it's morally acceptable to have slaves today?
Fuck off!
Fuck off is the answer.
What the garbage?
Was it morally
Yeah,
acceptable?
don't say.
It was
We
morally acceptable at
slave.
that
So I
time.
rest
We
my
had
case.
it
So answer my question. Is it morally acceptable to have slaves today?
What does it say in the Quran?
He's still not answering the
What
question.
does it say in the Quran?
Is there any Muslim that would like to answer the question?
Where does it say in the Quran that I should be slave?
No, but do ask it again, brother.
I'll do a census. We'll do a quick census of all of you who can hear my voice right now. If you are a Muslim, do you believe that it's morally acceptable to have slaves today? Put your hand up. None of them. And that's a good thing. It shows that you all have a conscience and you know right from wrong. Congratulations. But let me ask you this question. Is Muhammad a moral example to you? If he is a moral example, when he had slaves and he allowed his Sahaba to have slaves, is that something you should follow?
Jesus said you should have slaves.
No.
Jesus said be your slaves, kill your slaves. Why are you mad?
He always freed those people. He never kept them. He freed them. He got them to free them so that they could live their own life. It was a pagan belief at that time. All the pagans used to live in Arab before. At the time of Muhammad, there was a pagan religion at that time. People used to have false gods, idol gods that they used to believe. It was a cultural thing that he was trying to get rid of. And he would free the people. Don't quote me this because this is not the Quran. This is not Quran. You cannot quote
Thank you very much. Yes.
You cannot.
Yes.
Okay.
You cannot quote on this.
Thank you very much.
At that time, the Arab world, it was at that time, at Muhammad's time, it was all pagan. The religion was all the same belief that you celebrate Easter. That was the.
Sorry, I'll let him finish. Yeah.
You know how you celebrate Easter? Easter comes from the pagan religion.
Sister, may I respond? May I respond?
No, you can't touch lady.
Just because obviously the sister made a point. Her argument was that Muhammad was freeing slaves, that this was a pagan hangover that Muhammad was getting rid of.
Muhammad. Go to Muhammad.
Freeing slaves, and that this was something from the pagan past. Sahih Bukhari, Volume 3, Book 47, number 765, narrated by Qurib, the freed slave of Abi Nibas, that Maymuna bint al-Harith told him that she had manumitted a slave girl without taking the permission of the Prophet on the day when it was turned to be with the Prophet. She said, "Do you know, O Allah's Apostle, that I have manumitted my slave girl?" He said, "Have you really?" She replied in the affirmative. He said, "You would have got more reward if you had given her, i.e. the slave girl, to one of your maternal uncles."
Can I say something, please? Sir, excuse me, sir. Can I say something? Are you here to know about Islam? You really want to know about Islam?
Sister,
No.
She's not your sister.
I rejected Islam because of things like this.
This time, who are you?
I just want to say, just a suggestion, just if you want to learn about Islam,
Don't call me that. That's why I broke it this shit. Otherwise, that's not the shit.
Google and these books won't help
Don't
you.
call me this. Don't call me uncle. I'm your grown fucking dad.
No.
I'm grown dad. Don't
How do you know this is authentic? How do you know this is authentic? No. I can put anything on the internet. No. You want to learn You want to learn about Islam? These are not the things to do. Get the real Quran. Get the real Quran and study it. You will and start. If you're from Christian faith, you should read Surah.
Listen to your conscience, not to a book, because your conscience comes from God. The books we can debate about all day long. I'll ask you the question I started with. Muhammad kept slaves. The Sahaba kept slaves. Do the Muslims here believe that you should keep slaves? Just raise your hand. None of you. Because your conscience is greater than the Quran. Your
Children.
conscience
Children.
is greater than the hadith.
Children.
Listen to your conscience, not to the books, not to the preachers.
You know what the Quran says?
The Christian West has had the most slaves in history. How can you talk about slavery when the Christian West has had the most slaves in the history to today? Till today. Till today, explain it.
And you know what? He's just arguing. He just does not know.
You're just shouting. Why is the Christian West, the height of slavery came from the Christian West?
Okay. So this brother says, well, how can you talk about these things? European Christians have had the biggest slave industry in history. Wow. So now the reply. Firstly, slavery is universal. The word slavery comes from a Greek word referring to Slavs, which is white people enslaving white people. The Islamic slave trade started with Muhammad and continues today. You can still buy a black slave in Sudan. They steal them from the Christian south and they sell them in the markets of Khartoum. In Chad, the slavery is still an industry that goes on. The Islamic world has never fully outlawed the slave trade, and the reason is because they have no premise to do so. Slavery is justified in the Quran, it's justified in the Hadith.
Well, you've not justified it in Christianity.
Christians kept slaves.
not justified
This is a fact. We kept slaves. However, it was the Christians that outlawed slavery first.
And you made it.
It was Christians who used our armies and our navies to suppress the Islamic slave trade. It was Christian governments that put pressure on the Islamic governments to end their Islamic slave trade. This brother doesn't know about the Janissaries. This brother doesn't know about the Mamelukes. Do you know why? Because he doesn't know about Islamic history. The Janissaries were a slave army taken from white European Christians. The Mamelukes was a slave army taken from Africa. How can he justify Islam by pointing to the faults of Christians when Christians repented, when Christians fought against it, but the Muslims continue to do it today in Chad, in Pakistan, in Saudi Arabia, in Sudan. He has to learn his facts. The sister raises a good point. We know from the Hadith that Muhammad had slaves. We know from the Quran Muhammad had slaves. But look at Jesus, the Christ, in a time when slavery was permissible, in a time when Christ could have had slaves, he had none, not one, not ever, and he is our example. So I ask the Muslims, who is a better example according to your conscience, Muhammad or Jesus?